This is the F-15, one of the most advanced fighter jet in history.
"104 kills, 0 losses. In the entire history of jet combat, no aircraft has ever produced that record. Not the F-16, not the Su-27, not anything the Soviet Union ever put in the sky. But that number is not the most unbelievable part of the story. In 1983, an Israeli F-15 pilot lost his entire right wing in a mid-air collision. Not damaged, gone, completely sheared off. The aircraft flew for 7 more minutes. He landed it, and he had no idea the wing was missing until he climbed out of the cockpit and looked. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why that was physically possible and why the answer to that question is the same answer to why this aircraft has never lost a single air-to-air engagement in its entire operational history. The machine that physics forgot to limit. The F-15 Eagle entered service in 1976. It was built because the U.S. Air Force was afraid. In 1967, a new Soviet aircraft appeared, the MiG-25 Foxbat. Photographs showed enormous engines, massive intakes, and a top speed above Mach 3. Western intelligence analysts looked at those performance numbers and drew the obvious conclusion. If the Soviets could make something that fast, they probably made it maneuverable too. The U.S. Air Force issued a new specification. Build something that can beat this aircraft. The result was the F-15. Most people, when they think about why the F-15 is so dominant, think about its weapons, its missiles, its radar. The idea that it wins because it shoots better than everything else. That belief is understandable. It is also wrong. And the gap between that belief and the actual engineering is where the story of 104 to 0 lives. The F-15 doesn't win dogfights. It makes dogfights unnecessary. But here's where the engineering gets genuinely strange. What makes this even more extraordinary is that roughly 40% of the F-15's lift at high angles of attack doesn't come from its wings at all. It comes from the fuselage. The wide, flat underside of that aircraft is an aerodynamic surface. The designers shaped the body itself to generate lift, not just carry fuel and hold the engines. This is not a side effect. This is a deliberate structural decision, and it is the precise reason a pilot with no right wing could still fly his aircraft home. The wing didn't disappear. The fuselage was always doing part of its job. Now here is the engineering problem that made all of this necessary. Building a dominant fighter is a war against physics. Every advantage you gain costs you somewhere else. You want speed? Add thrust. More thrust means heavier engines. Heavier engines need stronger structure. Stronger structure adds weight. More weight demands more lift. More lift means bigger wings. Bigger wings create drag. Drag kills speed. You've gone in a circle. The F-15 program was asked to break that circle, and it broke it using 3 specific mechanisms, each one more surprising than the last. The first is thrust-to-weight ratio. Think of it like this. Imagine a car that produces more force from its engine than the car itself actually weighs. That car doesn't just accelerate. In the right conditions, it levitates. The F-15 at combat weight produces 47,540 pounds of thrust from 2 Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines. The aircraft weighs approximately 44,500 pounds at combat weight. The thrust-to-weight ratio is 1.07 to 1. The F-15 can point straight up and still accelerate. Every other aircraft in a turning fight is trading energy it will struggle to recover. The F-15 is not. The second mechanism is wing loading. That's the ratio of weight to wing area. Think of it as how hard the wings are fighting gravity just to keep the jet airborne. A lower number means the aircraft turns more efficiently without bleeding speed. The F-15 has 608 square feet of wing. At combat weight, that's roughly 54 pounds per square foot. For 1972, that figure was extraordinary. It meant the jet could sustain tight turns at high speed without hemorrhaging the energy it needed to escape, reposition, or strike again. But those two mechanisms create a conflict. Big wings for low wing loading generate enormous drag at high speed. You've built a Mach 2.5 jet that turns brilliantly, but pays a structural price for it, unless you solve the contradiction at a deeper level. And the third mechanism is where it gets unsettling. The engineers designed the fuselage as a lifting surface. The entire flat underside of the F-15's body was shaped in cross-section to generate aerodynamic lift. At high angles of attack, during the most extreme maneuvers, the fuselage contributes nearly 40% of total lift. The aircraft isn't relying only on its wings. It is, at its core, a flying body with wings attached. But here's what engineers still hadn't solved. Because none of this, not the thrust, not the wing loading, not the fuselage, matters in a fight if the pilot doesn't know where the enemy is. But the number that really puts this into perspective is 50,000. 50,000 feet per minute. That is the F-15's official published climb rate from the U.S. Air Force. A commercial airliner cruises at 35,000 feet. The F-15 reaches that altitude in under 42 seconds. That number changes everything about how you think about air combat. An aircraft that can dictate altitude in under a minute controls the geometry of every engagement before it begins. The enemy doesn't choose the fight. The F-15 pilot chooses it for him. Here is what the F-15 program actually figured out. The weapon doesn't win the fight. The information does. Vietnam changed everything. Post-combat analysis after the Southeast Asia Air War revealed a statistic that the Air Force could not ignore. More than 80% of U.S. pilots who were killed in air combat never saw the aircraft or missile that killed them. The kill was not a failure of firepower. It was a failure of awareness. They were dead before they understood they were in a fight. The F-15 was the first American fighter built from the ground up around fixing that failure. The first reveal, the canopy. The F-15 uses a one-piece blown bubble canopy with no frames in the forward arc. The pilot sits 9 inches higher than in the F-4 Phantom it replaced. 360 degrees of unobstructed sightlines. If an enemy aircraft is anywhere near the F-15, the pilot can see it. That single structural decision, 9 inches of seat height and a frameless canopy, has saved more lives than any missile in the inventory. The second reveal is the radar. The AN/APG-63 radar, installed in the original F-15A, could track targets at ranges exceeding 100 nautical miles. In 1976, when the most capable Soviet threat radars had detection envelopes of 20 to 40 nautical miles, the F-15 was already building a complete tactical picture of the battle space before the adversary pilot knew he was being tracked. By the time the enemy radar illuminated the F-15, the F-15 pilot had already identified the target, assessed the energy state, and chosen an engagement geometry. The adversary was responding to a script already written. Now here is where the misconception gets corrected. You believed the F-15 wins because it shoots better. That is not what is happening. The F-15 wins because it solves the problem before weapons ever enter the equation. The missiles are the last step. The information, the position, and the energy. Those are the first three steps, and they are already complete before the trigger is ever touched. The third reveal is the one nobody expects. The MiG-21, the Mirage 3, and the early MiG-29 variants that the F-15 faced in combat across the Middle East and Gulf. All of them had structural G limits below 9G. An F-15 pilot in a close turning engagement could simply pull harder than his opponent's airframe was rated to survive. He didn't need a better missile. He needed to tighten the turn. The adversary had to follow or disengage, and following meant overstressing his own aircraft. That combination, energy dominance, information dominance, structural dominance, is the engineering answer to 104-0. The weapons are real, but they are the final sentence of a conversation the adversary never knew was happening. And this is the detail that changes everything. When Viktor Belenko defected to Japan in September 1976, and U.S. engineers opened up the MiG-25 for the first time, they expected to find the avionics of a supremely advanced Soviet superfighter. What they found were vacuum tubes, not transistors. Vacuum tubes. The kind of electronics in your grandfather's radio. The aircraft's structural G limit was 4.5. The airframe was built primarily from welded steel because Soviet manufacturing lacked the precision titanium machining the design actually needed. The MiG-25 was not a maneuvering threat. It was a missile truck that could outrun anything in a straight line. An F-4 Phantom. The aircraft the F-15 replaced could have killed a MiG-25 in a close-turning fight. The F-15 had been engineered to destroy a fighter that did not exist. But here's what most people never realize. The fact that the F-15 was massively over-engineered for the wrong threat is not a failure. It is the reason this aircraft is still being ordered by the U.S. Air Force in 2024, nearly 50 years after its design was finalized. When the real threats eventually materialized, the Su-27 flanker, the MiG-29 Fulcrum, the advanced Chinese J-11, the design margins baked into the F-15 to beat a fictional Soviet superfighter turned out to be exactly the margins needed to beat the real aircraft. The intelligence failure produced a design excess, and that design excess is 5 decades of upgrade headroom. The F-15EX Eagle II costs approximately $87.7 million per aircraft. The U.S. Air Force is still buying them, not because the F-15 is the most advanced airframe in the inventory. The F-22 and F-35 exist, but because the F-15 was built with so much structural and performance margin that 5 decades of electronics upgrades, new weapon systems, and new threat environments have not found the ceiling yet. The Belenko defection revealed that the entire premise for the F-15 was wrong. The aircraft didn't need the premise to be right. It just needed to be built well enough that the premise didn't matter. That is the real engineering lesson of 104 to 0. Sometimes, the most correct thing an engineer can do is overbuild for the wrong threat, because the right threat hasn't shown up yet. Built to destroy a ghost, became one instead. Here is the debate worth having. Should the U.S. Air Force keep ordering F-15EX aircraft at $87.7 million each? Or is that budget better directed at accelerating a sixth-generation fighter program before a real peer adversary closes the gap? Both positions have serious engineering and strategic cases behind them. Put your answer in the comments. If you want to understand how the F-22 Raptor solved the stealth problem, the F-15 was never designed to touch. I've already broken that down in full. It's right here.